All right, and we're back. It's COMP2068. That's Advanced Web Programming here at Georgian, and it's week 9, lesson 9, part 1. Of course, I didn't put part 1 in here, but I will. I promise after. And what we're doing today is we're doing a bit of a review of what we did last day, and we're also doing some new stuff. We're going to do some new tools. Let's talk about the tools we're going to introduce. And again, I've been asked from the first class to kind of put some stuff up to talk about them. One of them is TypeScript. We're going to talk about TypeScript today in more detail. In prep, I would, if you could, please install, go to your terminal and install, do this installation, npm install -g TypeScript. Please do that now, right? As prep. We're going to talk about that. So I'm starting off a little bit differently than I did for the first class with all your tools you need, and then once you get all that going, we'll get into it as we go. So npm install -g TypeScript. And what is TypeScript anyway? TypeScript is what I'd like to call syntactic sugar on top of JavaScript. It makes you into a JavaScript ninja, right? If you want to be awesome, you want to have superpowers with JavaScript, you do TypeScript, right? TypeScript is supported 100% by Microsoft and for Angular from Google as well, right? So that's pretty good reasons why, like I said in other times, to learn TypeScript, right? Because if you know how to do that, and if you notice it's supported in VS Code, WebStorm, Atom, Sublime Text, Eclipse, and Brackets. It's not up here, but it does. It works for that as well. So if you want to not use VS Code, although I highly recommend you use VS Code, you can certainly use other ones, Brackets and Types and Sublime. Okay, so that's one. Part 2, what I want you to grab is I want you to download and install or use the npm to install something called HTTP server on the global namespace. We're going to use that later on. HTTP server is a micro node server that allows us to run a server very, very quickly for testing purposes alone. So please download and install that piece. HTTP server. For those people coming in, please, when you get in, we're going to download and install TypeScript with npm. So npm install TypeScript -g. You missed that one. That's this page here. And then we're going to install this one, which is npm install HTTP-server in the global namespace. And I move on. I'll give you all your tools to download and install, and then we'll get back to them later on. This way everyone has them and you can play with them as we go. All right. Next tool, as we continue. I want you to download and install Bower. Here's a new tool we're going to use. Bower is like, think of Bower like it's like an npm for the web. So instead of using something called npm install, we're going to use Bower install. And so, but for now, let's get Bower. Again, it's a package management utility that we're going to use for our web stuff, for jQuery, for downloading Bootstrap, for downloading all kinds of stuff, and including it in our files. We're going to use Bower. So npm install -g Bower. That's the next one. That's 3 packages. I got one more. And then after this, you'll have everything we need for today. Again, just to talk about what Bower is, for those people who don't know, think about Bower as a package manager, similar to NuGet, right? But where npm does installs for Node and Express and Node-related stuff, Bower does installs for everything else. Any other kind of JavaScript libraries you want to find and install, not related to Node. So like for front-end technologies, right? Like Angular. You can get Angular through Bower, right? And we'll talk about that later on, right? Okay, one more. We want to get TSD, which is npm install TSD -g, right? TSD is the TypeScript definition manager for TypeScript. You can't do TypeScript without a definition manager because TypeScript has type definition libraries that we use that describe the libraries, right? For example, that we want good typing or good IntelliSense. It's basically the way we get IntelliSense for our libraries. That's what the type definition libraries are. So example, if I want to get IntelliSense for jQuery, which by the way, we never get IntelliSense for jQuery, no matter what ID you're using, right? not proper IntelliSense. You want to use something like this TypeScript definition manager to do it, right? And we do it through TypeScript. Okay, so those are the ones. Well, we got them all. Anyone not able to get them or hasn't got them all? So there's really 4 I asked you. Let me go over them again for people who came in late. TypeScript. npm install -g TypeScript. That's the first one. HTTP server. Install npm install HTTP server -g in the global space. Sorry? No. Doesn't have to be in order. Another one is Bower. npm install -g Bower. And the last one is TSD. npm install TSD -g. What's that? The second one. HTTP server. And we'll talk about these a little bit as we go. So I just wanted you in the first 5 minutes to get all these ones, so that way people who are watching this from the first class, they can see that these are all the modules that we need to have our day go well. Okay, so all I've asked you to do is download and install some npm modules. Now they're in the global space, which means you should have access to them from your command line, right? Or terminal if you're using a Mac, or a Linux machine. That's what these things do. Okay, so let's get back to this. I'm just gonna minimize this for now. So I've asked you to get a bunch of stuff. I'm going to create. First of all, I want to go back and review what we did last week with our authentication piece. We had our files. Your files look like COMP2068 week 8. And if you want to know where to get those files, if you were away last week, as an example, or if by any chance you couldn't get around to doing that, you can get them at github.com/Georgian College, and then COMP2068 week 8 for your class, because your class is the weeks and the first class is the lessons. It's the same thing. I've just made different names for them, right? So week 8. If you don't have these, this is where you get them. Okay. I've also found a bug that I fixed in my code when I was typing like crazy, right? I had a little bit of a bug that I fixed up, and it's the routing bug. So what ends up happening is I had some really weird stuff come at me that says you've already written the header, that bug that I saw last week. I fixed it, and it's this version is the fixed version. Okay, so this is the file. So if you weren't here last week, please download this file, COMP2068 week 8. This is where we're going to start today. If you were here last week, please bring this file up. You should have it. And if you don't have it because you erased it, get it. All right. Yeah. For this one, for week 8? Could be. And I was a little bit off? All right. Yay! All right. So there's some other error that we found. Just a moment. Yeah, I knew it was going to be there, because that config passport stuff was just bad. So where was it? Was it lower or higher?
I think it was up higher. Just right up like the first. I thought it was in that where it was calling up the strategies.
Okay, see if you can find it, and then I'll put it in. Anyways, so what I want you guys to do is download this one, because we're going to use it as an example of how it works. And if I catch it, I'll try and correct it. Okay. So again, for those people who came in late, again, one more time, we're downloading a few packages. One of them is TypeScript in the global space. npm install -g TypeScript. Do that, please. The next one is HTTP server. npm install HTTP server. I'll go back to these afterwards. Then I got Bower, npm install -g Bower, and the last one is TSD, npm install TSD -g. Okay, so if you get all those, we're going to get back to them later on. Let's talk about this a little bit. So I'm going to bring up our VS Code. Here's Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to drag and drop week 8 in here on the side, right? There we go. Here's week 8. Notice how our package has a bit of a structure. I'm just going to kind of kill all these because we don't care about all this right now. I don't want them to be open. Our package has a couple things. One of them is the server.js, and we're going to talk about authentication in just a bit. So what is our server.js file? I want to talk about this a little bit because there's some confusion. Some people send me some email saying, Tom, I still don't get it. I'm lost, right? And I don't get this whole mean stack stuff. Express, Mongo, Angular, we haven't talked about yet, and Node. I don't get it, right? And it's mean is being mean is what it basically came back to me, right? I don't get it, right? So let's start with talking about this server.js file, right? So server.js, remember, we built this whole thing using a scaffold, the Express generator. That's what we did. We used Express, and I used the -e switch to install EJS as the view engine for this thing. And that's how we created this last week. We kind of started from scratch. We didn't start off with the stuff that came from Rich. We kind of started off right from scratch as a review, right? So part of this stuff is like, on our server.js is, what is this server.js file anyway that we speak of? And if you notice, I do some requires at first. So it says, okay, well, here's my app, and I do a require, and it's for this, this app file. What is this really doing, this require? What does require do? Anybody? It's like an include, it's like an import, right? So it imports the file, which is app.js, into this hierarchy. Imagine that app.js is coming before all this stuff. So I configure app.js first. It kind of comes into place right here on line 7. Imagine it's almost like I'm saying, take app.js and pop it right in here. This is the place that I want you to put it in. App.js is going to be on line 7. Everything from app.js. And if you look at app.js, it's a bunch of lines. So let's say these 89 lines of code, they're going to just like pop right in here. Poof, on line 7, right? Not only that, but they're also going to, I can access the output from app.js, right? Right here in the app variable. That's what it does, right? So I can say app.set, and I can set the port as an example. I can do that. And if you notice this way of doing things, we're also requiring, which is something interesting, this old node HTTP service, right? We're requiring this node service, right? Whereas in Express, we don't need it. We can run a server without using node, this HTTP service, right? Let me give you an example of that. So if I pull up Express for you, so here's Express.js, right? And if I go to getting started, right? And if I scroll down, if I look, to see this stuff, I go, here's my hello world example. Here it is. Look, here's a server, and I'm listening on 3000, but I don't got any HTTP service whatsoever. I don't need a service, but yet in my scaffold, I have it, right? And I use it to create my server. This is the old way. Remember, we did this with Node, with Rich. First way we created a server was this way, right? And this is what this is doing. This is actually creating an old-style Node server that's right in here. That's right from our, our scaffold. Okay, so that's one. So when I say var port is equal to normalized port, and I have this process, see that I have this process. It's another thing that came up. They're like, hey, Tom, you used this process keyword in authentication last week, and we didn't understand. Process.nextTick. What the hell does that mean, right? How come you're using process? Is process a JavaScript thing? We never learned JavaScript, so I don't understand. Guys and girls, process has nothing to do with JavaScript. Process has to do with Node. When we're learning Node and Express, we're not learning JavaScript. We're learning Node and Express. JavaScript is the syntax that we're using, right? It's JavaScript. But its Node is an API, a programming interface that we have to learn, right? And that means we have to learn the classes and the modules and the methods, the properties that are associated with Node and Express and so on. It's not JavaScript. We're using JavaScript, but it's an API. Whenever I use an API, I can use standard JavaScript, if statements, functions, variable declarations, all that kind of stuff. That's basic JavaScript, right? Maybe a little bit of prototyping, right? That kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the stuff we're seeing, the format, the syntax, everything else we're seeing is not JavaScript, it's Node, right? So it's not like you need to know JavaScript necessarily and be an expert in JavaScript to understand what's happening. You just have to understand the API. And in order for us to understand it, you could read the API, but most of us, let's face it, don't read anything, right? We just watch and learn. We watch a tutorial, we do a couple things, we check it out, and we forget it. If it pings in our brain, we're good, right? So I'm here to kind of clarify that. So here, this require stuff isn't JavaScript. This is a module that we're using that's built on top of JavaScript to help us include a module, an external document, that's not inside this document that we're looking at right here. All it's doing is saying, when I say require, it means take the document that's inside the quotation marks and the brackets here, in this method, the require method, take it and assign it a reference to it as an object in this variable. Now there's two ways I can do that. I can do it like this, or if I look in the app.js module, if I go here, you also see it like this, where there's no variable whatsoever. There's different things that this does. Okay, so notice what it's doing here. I never require my server.js from my app.js because that's a cyclical requirement. I would like require one and it's kind of including the other one. I'd have a kind of a weird error happening, right? So I don't do that. But if I read my app.js file from line 1 all the way down, and if I scroll all the way down, it's going to get to a part where I have this thing that says module.exports equals to app. And module.export does what? What does module.export do? Whenever I see module.exports, anybody? Come on. Exports it, right? It exports this variable app. It exports, that's the one that's being exported. It's not the entire file. It's everything that makes up app and how we've configured the app variable. That is what that package is going to be exported to the server.js file, right? So if I go all the way up to the top and see where I got app, I start off with some declarations, and if you notice, I'm requiring a bunch of modules. These are all the node modules. And remember what my app.js file is in this case. It's like a manifest. All I'm doing is I'm slapping functionality into my manifest. It starts off with no functionality, and then I'm adding express, and then I'm adding path, favicon, logger, cookie parser, body parser. Then I start in with the authentication stuff with session, mongoose, flash, passport, and blah, blah. And I keep adding functionality on top of it. Because in the beginning, Node is very lean. It has nothing, right? It only has some basic stuff that comes with Node, like example, the HTTP service that allows you to generate a server. Pretty much that and a couple of other things, and that's it. File access through the file server module, and that's about it. So, I mean, really, it's really bare bones, and we have to add stuff to it for us to get functionality, right? So where do we define app? Well, right here. App is actually equal to an instance of Express. Right? So when I say app is equal to Express, what I'm really saying is take my Express module and I want to create an object of type Express. And what is Express anyway? Express is a series of classes and objects and methods and properties that allow me to use things like more advanced server stuff. I can do routing. I can also do things like what Express allows me to do. I can use templating. I can have a template engine, a view engine if you will. All that kind of stuff is bundled with Express. So when I create a variable called app and I point it to Express, which is right here, what I'm actually doing is saying, hey, what I'm saying is var is equal to new Express. A new Express application is what I'm doing, a new Express object. And now what I can do with this Express object is I can do things like app use. Once I start using app use, I engage the methods that I've incorporated. So I have all these other methods and classes. When I go app use, I attach them. I register them, right, to my entire application. So notice I've added in the body parser, different parts of body parser Express. I've added this is where I physically add functionality. Then I use my session. I use my flash. I include passport. All this stuff. I even include things like routes and users. I include those kind of routes. And I keep going. I add error handling, all kinds of other stuff. And then finally, when I'm done adding everything to functionality, I pass that big package, that massive object that I've kind of created through this one file. I pass it all to the server.js file. So this is where the server.js file gets it, right here. Boom. Now this, what it does is not only can I do that, but I also set the port because I'm keeping on the app stuff. And I keep going. I have my server is an Express server, or sorry, is a server, an HTTP server, that I use my app as the main, the features of my HTTP server, like the routing and everything else. I use that package. It kind of reads this package so that I can do things like server.listen on a specific port, this one, right? That's what it does. And mind you, I could have written both those two files, server.js and app.js, in one big long file. but we want a separation of concerns. We want to break some of this stuff up. I want to break up the server piece into the server.js file, and I want to break up the other piece, the app.js file, which links all my other stuff together into its separate file. And that's what those two things do, right? So then, when I add other files in there, like if I go back to app.js to explain this, and if I go to the top where I start adding stuff in, here's one. So I'm requiring this a db.js, which is in my config folder. So let's go to my config folder and give you an example. Here's my db.js. What am I doing here? There's another way of using module exports. I can say module exports equal to a variable, or I can say module exports equals to this anonymous object. That's what this is. This is an anonymous object that has a property, URL, and a value, key value pairs, right? That's how JSON objects look. This is an anonymous object, and I'm exporting it. This is one of my exports. So whoever imports it by using the require statement, going back to app.js, I'm importing it, this object, and I'm assigning it to DB. That means DB, if you notice if I hover over it, Visual Studio Code gives me a little bit of code hinting that says, hey, DB is actually an object that has one property, URL, that's a string. Okay, that's what it is. And that property I can take and use here in my Mongoose Connect. I'm actually using that property. I never defined it here. I defined it here in this file in db.js. But somehow, over here, it knows, right? My app.js knows that db has a URL property because I've defined it in config.js, or the config folder in db.js. Similarly, I do the same thing in passport.js, but for passport, right? Notice how not only do I require it, I don't assign it to anything. I could have said passport is equal to require passport or something else like that, or passport config is equal to require passport config, right? I could have done that, and I could have had a variable that I could use if I wanted to. But in this case, I don't need to. But what I'm doing actually is taking the object passport, so all the modules and everything else, the passport that we're talking about, and sending it into this passport.js file, which is in my config file. So I'm saying take a reference to the passport that I installed here in my app.js and include it and send it into my passport.js. And when I get my passport.js, I take it in here. Here's where I do my module exports, right? So here's my module exports here, if you notice. And not only do I export, I have an anonymous function, right, that takes one parameter, which I'm getting from my app.js. Here's my app.js parameter, taking that. But I'm exporting that back out, right, which is interesting, back out to the calling function, which is app.js. So what I'm doing is I'm passing in a reference to passport through this mechanism, and that I can use. And at the end, this whole function, this all anonymous function, is the one that's being passed out. That means that this function is being exposed, this anonymous function, is being exposed on the root, right? On the app.js, this right here. Right? So I kind of do this stuff. Basically, when I do this without a variable, I say just go and do this. Execute. Execute and pass in this passport. I'm calling the function. It's a self-executing anonymous function that I'm sending in passport. That's what I'm really doing. Okay? Now, if you don't understand what a self-executing anonymous function is, right, that's what JavaScript's about. And people don't understand those things. But this stuff that you're seeing here, that's not vanilla JavaScript. This stuff that we see here is Node. This is Node's requirement. This is Node syntax, if you will, for JavaScript. JavaScript is just our vehicle, right? Well, if you understand JavaScript, you should understand this notation. That's what they're saying, right? So there's the confusion around that. Confusion about what JavaScript looks like and how it's used. So here's the funny part. This is what killed everybody last week for the first class and the second class. You have several functions layered within the functions. Here's an anonymous function, right, as an example. Here's an anonymous function in this passport.serializeUser method, right? And I'm passing in an anonymous function. Well, that's like a callback function. That's what it is. I don't have to pass in an anonymous function. I could pass in a named function. The reason why we use anonymous functions is because that function, chances are, will never be used again, right? So why give it a name? Simplified way of doing things, right? I don't have to use a named function in this particular case, right? Notice how it's not the same function that I'm passing into here. It's different. So therefore, I can't use the name function. If it was the exact same, yeah, I could probably use the name function. It would function the exact same way, right? And if you have code duplication, that's where we want to use a name function when it's not the same. Or when it is exactly the same. We're using the same function over and over again. But when it's not the same, that means we're going to have a bunch of named functions we're going to use once. And JavaScript says, the best practice of JavaScript says, no, please don't create named functions that we're only going to use one time. Make them anonymous and make them inline, like this, right? Here's another one, process.nextTick. You guys went crazy for that. Not you, but maybe the class before you, right? Hey, what the hell is this process.nextTick, Tom? That doesn't make any sense. And what I'm going to tell you is this. Process has nothing to do, like I said, with JavaScript. Process has something to do with Node. What Node does is it goes to the thread pool, right? Think about this thread pool when I talk about threading, right? Imagine if I'm on one highway, okay? And the highway that I'm traveling on, this one highway, that is the path that I have to do my work. I have one application running on the highway. Well, every time I go to the thread pool and I want another thread, it's like I'm adding another lane virtually. Hey, guess what? Hey, imagine if you could, like you're on the highway on the 400 someplace and it's really busy and I go, poof, I press a button and all of a sudden there's another lane that I can go in. It's magical. It just appears between the other lanes. That's what threading is all about. It creates additional lanes, right, of, that I can run other applications within, other functions, other processes that can go through there, right? And what Node does is it pulls from this process pool or this thread pool. It pulls a thread from the thread pool and says, hey, give me a thread. Okay, good. Now I'm going to use this thread pool, this numbered thread pool, this new lane, so I can do this little bit of a functionality. That's what it does, right? And then when it's done, it returns the thread back to the thread pool so it can be used by another process. Okay? That's what Node does. So when I use this process.nextTick, what I'm actually saying is, hey, the process that I'm currently running on, all right, I want this function that I've got here, this anonymous function, that's right here, that I've passed into my nextTick method. I want this one to be the next function that runs. I want it to supersede any other thing that's going to happen in that process, in that thread. That's the next thing that happens, all right? The next tick, the next time around, remember the thread is run, Node is a big event a big event loop. It keeps on listening for stuff over and over again. It's a loop. It's I'm listening. The server keeps listening, right? So on the next loop around, when it comes back, X number of times per second, right? It comes back and it says, okay, I'm listening again. I want this one to be the next tick. I want this one to be the next function that's run, the first one. I want to hoist this one to the top of the thing. And that's what this process.nextTick does. Okay. So again, you might see this stuff. You might see these anonymous functions. And you might see functions within functions. And that's what really kills people when they look at it. And the one thing that really bugs us when we look at this kind of stuff, and especially when we look at this file here, this app.js, there's no code hinting whatsoever for app.js, for Express. You don't get any code hinting whatsoever. I don't sit there and go, did I put this in right? Is it the right path? Does an Express module even exist? None of that happens. I don't have any code hinting. In other languages, C#, Java, whatever, I have code hinting, I have IntelliSense. I don't have anything like that for Node, which for beginners is challenging. Because you look at it and go, well, I don't know what to do next. I don't have some kind of code hinting to help me code Node or Express. I don't have that, right? And that's where TypeScript comes in. TypeScript allows us to get code hinting when we write JavaScript. Doesn't matter whether you're writing Node, whether I'm writing a game, right? Doesn't matter what I'm doing. TypeScript gives us superpowers when it comes to writing JavaScript because it's not a different language. What it does is, like I said, it adds strict typing to JavaScript, because JavaScript is loosely typed, right? You can declare JavaScript, a variable in JavaScript 1 minute as a number, and the next minute as something else. By the way, what are the types? There are types in JavaScript. What are they? Anyone know? How about the guy in the back? If you just came in, I can tell you. What are the types that you can think of in JavaScript? Some types. Boolean, what else? Number. It's a number. It's number. It's called number, right? Number. All numbers, right? What else? String. That's good. What else? How about any? That's a type. How about object? That's another type, right? So there's a bunch of types. Those are the main things. So it's what we do is in JavaScript, what we do is we perform something called type inference, right? So we never actually declare the type. I don't say, var my number is a number and then assign it to something else. We never do that like we do in Java and C# and name the language, right? We kind of use, if we have kind of a strictly typed language, we kind of do type declaration first. We don't do type declaration explicitly in JavaScript, but we do it in TypeScript. And why we do it in TypeScript is because it gives us good tooling, right? That means I can't use a number. I say my number is equal to a number, like number 5, and then the next line it's going to say my number is equal to string. I can't do that. In JavaScript, you can. And either you love it or you hate it. You like the flexibility that you can use one variable to kind of be different types. I don't know how you would. Or you hate it, and you're like, that's really bad form. Why would I want to ever use a variable to do different things, right? Because it can be flexible, right? Sometimes it can solve problems. That's what JavaScript was there for in the beginning. JavaScript uses a functional programming approach, right, with prototypical inheritance, right, which is a little bit foreign to us for the most part. If you are someone who comes from an object-oriented background like we are, all people in this room, you've learned about object-oriented programming, yeah? Then when you do JavaScript, you're like, hold on, this is totally unstructured. I don't understand why it's like this, right? But actually, it gives you a bunch of flexibility, things that you can do with functional programming methodologies you cannot do with object-oriented programming, right? Not in the same way. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a hint about what this is. So let's run this thing, and let's see what it does. First of all, in order for me to run this, I need my little application. Before I do authentication, I need a Mongo server to run. That was one of the other questions you had. I don't know why, Tom, but I can't make this thing work. It doesn't connect to my Mongo server. Well, yeah, it won't connect, right, unless you run a Mongo server. So let's run one. So we're going to say on the Mac sudo mongod, and if it's installed properly on the terminal on your path, it should work. If it doesn't, you can navigate to where you've installed MongoDB and then execute. Okay, and when I do that, I have this MongoDB server running at 27017, right? That's the default port for MongoDB, but you can reconfigure, by the way. Okay, so now that I have the server running, this is my data store right here. This is the server. Now you can run it here locally. You can run it in MongoLab, right, somewhere else. But this is the Mongo server that's keeping our data store. So we can't connect with this app unless we do that. Let's open up this app in terminal window. And again, in VS Code, right-click here in the sidebar and go into Open in Terminal, which will bring up a terminal window, right, which is right here, actually. Let's try that again. I probably have another one somewhere. Let's try that one more time. Open in Terminal. It's probably in the background somewhere. It's probably open like 10 times. Okay? Anyways, and of course, whenever I try and do these demos live, they never go as I plan, right? But that's okay. So here's the other way you can do it. You can go CD, like we did before, and then you can drag in your week 8, right? And then from here, I want to launch NodeMon, and if I did everything correctly, it's going to launch. There's NodeMon, right? So if I go back into to test this out, let's just run this thing in a new window, and I go localhost 3000, I should get my user authentication. So you should get that now. And the reason why is because I got my Mongo server running. You need to have your Mongo server running to test authentication. There's no way you can do it without, okay? And then I have my NodeMon running my Node server. Those two things have to be running in order for me to be able to connect. And let's register, like we were told. It doesn't work, right? Let's see if it works. So I'll register. And I'll register an email, like, I don't know, Darth Vader at starwars.com. And here's my username, so Darth.Vader. And my password, 123456. And my display name, Darth Vader, right? Which in German somehow means the father. Anyways, let's go into submit, right? Piece of trivia for it. Worked. There's Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and Conehead. What a good combination of heroes for me, huh? Right? So here's Darth Vader, and you know what? It's pretty cool. I'm logged in. I can do my thing, right? I can see these are all my users. This is my user view. This is my dashboard that I get as an administrator of this thing. So that's how I'm logged in now, right? If I log out, this is where we said we had the problem, right? Darth.Vader 123455, right? 6. Let's try that out. So Darth.Vader. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we did this wrong, then it'll just deny us. We did. So okay. We're good. Right? Registered. Right? All right. So so this is we kind of log in, we can log out, and we use Express, Mongoose, and Passport to do it. We haven't used in any way Angular, right? And we haven't used, of course we use Node because Node is the base system, right? But Angular here is not being used. And by the way, just to talk about Angular a little bit, this week I was going to introduce AngularJS. We're going to talk about it, but I've pushed it back. I pushed back your assignment number 2, right? It's due next Wednesday at midnight. And the reason for that is because we're on a train, a fast-moving train with this class, right? And some people just aren't getting it. So I want to give you another shot, another week, to kind of absorb authentication and to put a spin on your personal portfolio site so that authentication works by using a working version of something, a template, a prototype that you can use to, with some code examples, to make your own. And that's the reason why we're doing it. Okay, but for the final project, originally Angular was supposed to be a requirement. I'm going to make it an option, right? So you can use Mongo Express and Node. Angular is an option, which you'll get a bonus point, right? So you'll get bonus points to use Angular. I'll give you a whole set of bonuses to do it. And the reason for that is it'll make it a little bit more straightforward for those people who have trouble absorbing what we've already done, right? At the end of the class, what I'll be doing is I'll be introducing you to some stuff on Code School where I want you to do a little bit of a tutorial. And we're going to put it out over a couple weeks, the tutorial. We're going to have a lab associated to it, so I'm going to test to see that you've done it. And then we're going to have some good conversation around Angular. If you don't do the tutorial and you come to class undone and you haven't done the lab, you're going to miss your 2.5% from the lab, number one. And the second thing is we're not going to have a great conversation. You're not going to understand what the hell I'm talking about for Angular. I'm not going to let Angular go, but I want you to have a time, a couple weeks to absorb what it's all about, right? So before we get together, it's almost like pre-reading. Oh my God, what a novel concept. Read the textbook, right? There is no textbook that covers everything that this does for Angular, but there's a really cool tutorial I want you to do, and I'll introduce that to you at the end of class. All right, so on that, so we've done this. We've talked about how bad Node is when it comes to code hinting. Code hinting is bad for Node, right? We said it a couple times. So let's get back to the basics. Let's get back and create a regular JavaScript application to kind of point this out in more detail, right? So how do we do that? I'm going to create a new application. First of all, I'm going to stop this thing. So stop running this one. And you know what? I might as well stop my Mongo server because I'm not going to need it for today, right? Stop my Mongo server. There it is. It's gone, right? And let's just kill all these terminals and the terminal that I have here just to make sure that that's not the reason why my stuff is not working. And here in Visual Studio Code, I want to kind of create a new folder on the desktop. I'm just going to get a bunch of clutter right now that I'll clean up later on. But this morning I made it COMP2068 Lesson 9. And of course for you guys, we're going to make a new folder that's going to be COMP2068. And then it's going to be week 9. Right? Well, week 9, holy crap, can't believe it. And I'm going to take this, this folder and I'm going to drag it to the right side of VS Code, which makes a link or a reference to my operating system files here. Okay, cool. So what we want to do here is I want to create a basic index.html, project, like a basic, project without Node. Okay, no Node, just JavaScript. Okay, let's try this again. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to right-click here and go New File, and I'm going to say index.html. I want that file there for sure, right? Index.html. And you know what? I want to start from scratch because I'm really lazy, right? So I want to go to Bootstrap and get a template from Bootstrap, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to go to my Bootstrap here. One of these files has it. Users, no, it's not that one. It's not that one. One of these ones has it. There we go, this one. So I'm going to go to Bootstrap. Here it is. And this is the, if you go to Bootstrap itself, here, and if I go to Getting Started, and I kind of scroll down on Getting Started, you can see that there's a template, a basic template that I'm going to grab. Here it is, this basic template. I'm going to copy this basic template from Bootstrap, and I'm going to go back to my VS Code and dump it into my file here, right? So this is my Bootstrap template that I just got from Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com, right? Again, I just went to this location here, Get Bootstrap, Getting Started, and I went to the bottom where I have this template, and I pulled it into here. Okay, here's what I don't need. I don't need any of this stuff. So this is gone, right? So I'm not going to really do Bootstrap. And you know what? All this stuff here, all these JavaScript files, oh, they're gone too. I like my Hello World, though. I don't want to kill that. And I want to change my title. I want to change my title to COMP2068, and we'll say Week 8. 9. Week 9. Thank you. And we'll kind of move this all over here, like this, kill this little comment. So we have a good structure. I'm going to save, right? And just because of this, I also want you to see some shortcuts. I want to use a shortcut to make a paragraph that's full of some text. So I'm going to use this notation. It's emmet, and I don't know if you guys have seen it before, but I kind of think I've done it with you one time. P greater than lorem 50, and then press tab. And then I get like 50 words in my paragraph, right? Let me do that again. Whoop. Yeah, because emmet is built in, right? It's built into VS Code, right? So if I go P, so paragraph, greater than means it contains, a paragraph that contains a lorem ipsum text with 50 words, and press tab, gives me 50 words, right? And if I save that, I get 50 words in my paragraph. That's really quickly. We use emmet for quick prototyping, right? So instead of having me to type 50 words that are random, right, or dragging and dropping from somewhere else, I can do it right in line, right, like this. Okay, so that's kind of cool. We're going to do more with emmet as the time goes, but that's one of the things we want to do, right? So I got a simple web page. And remember what we do with a simple web page. When I want to link a JavaScript file to it, I have to have the JavaScript file first. But let's suppose that I don't. I'm going to have a script tag, so script. And in my script tag, I need a source. And in my source, I'm going to kind of call my app.js, this new app.js file I'm making, app.js, right? And I don't have it, so I'll make it over here in the root. So I'll go new file, app.js. Yeah? Let's go back. Let's slow down. In my index.html, I have basic stuff. Even if you couldn't get the stuff from Bootstrap, make a basic file that has a doc type, some meta tags, a title, an h1 tag with hello world, lorem ipsum text, and a script tag that points to an app.js file that you created in the root. Okay? In my app.js file, all I want you to put in there for now is some comments. App.js. Right? So some comments. Okay? And I'm going to save this thing. Okay, well, normally we can run an index.html file by double-clicking the HTML file because you don't need a server to run an HTML file in a file. But for our purposes, what I want you to get used to is using a little microserver we're going to make. Right? So I'm going to right-click here in the sidebar, and I'm going to say Open in Terminal, which should work. Yay! That worked this time. So here's my terminal, and in my terminal, I'm going to type the following. Remember I asked you to do that install? Remember I said install npm install, right, HTTP server. Remember this one, -G? That's what I'm going to use now. I'm going to use this server right now. So I'm going to say HTTP-server. And if you have it, it'll run a little microserver. That's what HTTP server does. So I'll pull that up for a second. That's not that one. Drats. Probably killed it. So if I go to HTTP server, let's try this out, HTTP-server, if I was to look that up, then what it is, again, it's a little microserver as an NPM module. That's what it is, right? It's a zero configuration command line HTTP server, zero config. It's purely for testing. That's what it's for, right? And what it does, if you look at this, it kind of creates a server on your local host on port 8080 by default. So if I was to type that in, so if I go localhost 8080, then I should have hello world, lorem ipsum, blah, 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 with my 50, words of text. Okay? So there's a quick and dirty way of creating a little microserver if you want to test functionality, especially if you want to make sure that it's running on the server and it's not just running from command line, because sometimes what happens is if you just double-click something in your file folders, it runs, but then something breaks because it's requiring a server. This way, you don't require a server, it's running for you, and it's a little node server that runs. Questions up to this point, what I've done. Okay, one thing I want to do is I want to expose my console. How do I expose my console here in my browser? How can I look at the console view in my browser? Anybody remember? Console in the browser. I want to see the console. How do I see the console in the browser? Well, it's part of my development tool. So I can go to, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can go here to my hamburger. That's what this thing is, right? My sandwich, right? The 3 lines that are on the right side, right? I could go down here and go to more tools, and I could go down to developer tools, right? I could go there and open it up this way. right? And then it points to console. That's one way I could do it. Or I could do this. I could right-click anywhere on the page and click Inspect Element, right? And then it'll bring me to Elements, but I can click on Console. So an extra step. So instead of you going to the menu and going the hamburger and blah, 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 this way. So I want to expose this console because this is where I'm going to be testing some of my JavaScript today. All right? Okay, right now there's nothing that's popping up because I haven't accessed any JavaScript, right? But we're going to do that in a second. By the way, let's set up a little GitHub repository for those people who are a little slower than I am and who want to kind of pick it up where I left off, or they want to look at my code. Maybe they typed it wrong and it didn't work for them. So I'm going to kind of set that off. So I'm going to go to github.com, and we're going to go to Georgian College, and I'm going to make a new repository here, and we're going to do it. Make sure it's on Georgian College, and we're going to call this thing COMP2068, and it's going to be week 9. I got that right. Okay, once I've got that, it gives me some instructions on what to do. If I can follow these instructions if I want, right? Now I have access to my terminal. Let's go back here and stop running. Look at how it runs. It runs just like a node mon, right? Kind of monitors what's going on here. You can also make it restart as well if I want to. But for now, I'm just going to stop my server, and I'm going to install Git. And the way we do that is Git init on command line, right? So initialize the Git repository, right? Look at the code. It's right here. All the lines of type are right here, right, from GitHub. Right? Next one is, I don't want to add a README file, but I want to do commit, right? So git commit -m, or well, actually, sorry. Oh, let's back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Whoa. One thing I know is I want to have whenever I have a Git repository that I want to share on GitHub, I want to have a git ignore file. So I want to create a git ignore file here in my root of my folder. So I'm going to say new file, git ignore. Okay, and I want to include a couple things. If I have node modules, by any means, for whatever reason, if I run node, I want to exclude node modules. I'm on the Mac, so I want to exclude DS store files, any DS store files, because I'm running on a Mac, and Mac has a bad habit of putting these DS store files, along with your stuff. You don't care about those. So I want to include those two things in my git ignore file for sure, right? And there's other things I can include there as well. So I have my git ignore file. Notice that I have a few changes here, and it shows the changes in VS Code. I'm not going to do it through VS Code today at the beginning. I'm going to go through command line. Here it is. So I'm going to say git add dot, which basically adds all the files into my staging area. Now I can go git commit -m, and the message is initial commit. Right, here's my initial commit for my repository. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it to GitHub. And of course, the nice code for that is right here in GitHub. So it's going to take this nice code right here, copy it, put it back, and paste it. Press enter. Now I have a remote. I've configured a remote, which is GitHub, with that specific file, that repository. Then I'm going to go git push -u origin master, just like it says here on the left. No difference. And then press enter. What this does is it takes my files that are local and pushes them up to GitHub so you can see them here. So if you can't follow around fast enough, or if I went too quick, go up on GitHub and grab this stuff, because I'm going to be continuously adding to this as we go. Questions so far? We've covered a little bit of Express and Node again, the inner workings of it, and how it works, telling you that it's not pure JavaScript. It uses JavaScript, but it's not JavaScript. Node is Node. It's an API, and we use JavaScript to consume that API. All right? And we've also talked about how it's loosely typed. JavaScript is loosely typed, doesn't have good typing, and it also doesn't have good code hinting, and we're going to use TypeScript in order for us to do that. Okay? Okay, let's get back to our code here for a second. So here's our code, and in my app.js file, I'm going to write a little function, right, that we're going to call init. Now I'm going to write it in the old way. I'm going to say function init. And inside my function, I'm going to write a console command. It's console.log. And I'm going to say app started. Right? There's my app started. Okay. Questions for you guys, right? I've attached my app.js into my index.html. Will this, the way I've written it, pump out anything to the command line? Why? You mean I have to call init? Yes, I do. I have to call init because if I don't call init, it'll never run. Well, how about if I just do this? Is this good enough? Can I do that? That will work. Let's check it out. If I run this, and if I go run back to my server, and let's say start my server again, so I'll say http-server, run it, and I go back to my files over here and refresh, then I should have app started. All right, so I've made the connection. I have my index.html, and this is the basic static website I've made with a bit of JavaScript, and I've connected JavaScript to the website at the bottom in the body, right? And as soon as it hits that line, right? If I go back to my code here, right? As soon as it hits that line in my index.html, once it goes down, it reads the index.html line by line, and it goes down to line 13. What a lucky number that is! And it says, like tomorrow's Friday the 13th, and then it hits line 13 and goes, hey, run this, include this JavaScript in my file. Yeah. I don't mind, as long as you don't mind me yelling. I'm good. All right, good. So app.js is being run right here on line 13, and then the body tag is finished here, completing the body element, right? And then the HTML tag hits, completing the HTML element, right? That's what happens. So it hits every line, finally gets down to this script and runs this script in order. So this script is run first. We declare the function, and then we call the function. So this is function declaration. And this down here, right, is a function call, right? I made a function call. I have declared a function. I can't make a function call without declaring a function. Hey, here's something. If I go here, what if I have another function and I do one of these and I put it inside this function, like this, and I call my function my first method. This is my first method. And in my first method, I'm going to have another console command, console log. This is the first method. Yay! Okay, my first method. Can I access that this first method function out here? Can I go like first method? We did the other one, right? You said that I could just call my function out here. Is that possible? How come? How come I can't call that method? I mean, it's under squiggly. There's a squiggly there. What? What do you mean? It's like I've got the function right here. It's there. And how come I can't access it over here? I can access the init, right? Scope. I like to hear the scope word. And you're right. And both of you guys are right. Here's what it is. My function, this function here, is declared within this block scope. Just like any variable, it lives and dies in this block scope. It never escapes. It's like a black hole, right? So basically anything that's created in here, if I create a variable in here, it doesn't leave this scope. That's what I want you to think of it like. It's actually not true, but I want you to think of it that way, okay? All right, so, but anything that's in this scope lives and dies in this scope, and that means this function isn't accessible. Inside here? Like here? In the brackets, like this? No? How can I do that? Because in here, in my init method, do I take a parameter in my init function? I don't, right? How about this? Can I do this? Could I do like first method, and then can I do one of these? Can I? Okay, I want you to know. I want to hear some words here. Let's find out. So do you think it's going to run, my first method? No, come on, I want you to guess. Let's say this. Tell me what it is. Is it going to run? Sure. Anyone else? Anyone says no? You say no. How about you? You say yes? Come on. I want you to stand fast, man. Hold your place in line. Is that yes? It will run? How about you? Do you think it's going to run? You think it's going to run? How about you? No. Anyone else on this side? Is it going to run? Don't test it. All right, let's go back. Let's check out why it doesn't run, and I'll show you why it doesn't run. If I go back here and I refresh, I get this, app started, right? But when I get to this part, it doesn't know what first method is, because the way I've coded this thing, there is no first method attached to this function. It's inside the function, but it doesn't mean that this function has a method that's called first method. We don't write methods this way. We need to use another word called prototype. and we have to use the name of the function init, and then we can do first method. Let's try that out. Let's say if we were to do this like this. So if I say init dot prototype dot first method, right? By the way, you can see that prototype has got a bit of an error, right? Hey, what's the name prototype? There's init. How come that doesn't work? What are we talking about here? But that's the way it's going to be written, like this. Nope. We're trying to make it so that init first method is this. How about if I do this? How about I make it an anonymous call, right? So we made a name function this way. There's different ways to name functions. We didn't do this in the first class. I can do this, right? So var first method, then I could do this. First method is equal to an anonymous function. It's exactly the same, no? How about if I do this? First method now, right? I can say this dot first method. How about we do that? Which is kind of weird, right? That's a weird notation too, because JavaScript has these weird, notations. This dot first method is equal to function. Will it run now? Let's see what it'll do now if I do this dot first method. And if I go back to my code here and refresh, I get nothing, right? It says unexpected token. Oh, maybe I made a mistake typing. That's the syntax here. Let me see if that ran. So I've got these brackets that go to here, and I got this bracket that goes to here. Oh, that's what I need there. Okay, let's try that again. And I'm going to go back to this and refresh, and no. First method of undefined. I can't read property first method of undefined. Doesn't know what it is, right? So that doesn't work. How about I use the property stuff in there, right? I'm just saying, I'm trying this out so you can see, right? If I go first method instead of first method, how about I go this dot prototype? Can I do that? Prototype dot first method is equal to function. How about that one? Will that work? Let's see if this works. So using the prototype keyword. Nope. So it's not easy. It's getting there. Look, it's actually trying. It says uncaught type error cannot set property first method of undefined. Right? So it's trying. It really is. Right? Okay, how about this? How about this? I got to try more stuff with you, right? So this is all about JavaScript today, right? And a little bit of TypeScript, I hope. If we go back to this, and how about if I, instead of declaring it a function like this, I actually did something like this. I said, well, I want to declare, I want to say var, my numbers is equal to one of those, right? Here's bar my numbers is one of those, and my first number is first number. Can I do this? Is equal to 1, and then my second number is equal to 2. Can I do that? It says var my numbers. It says unused local variable. That's what the underscore is, but it's my numbers. Can I access it over here? Can I go something like init dot my numbers? Can I do that? Right? How come? How about my numbers dot first number? I'm just telling you. I'm trying here. Right? How about if I put this to it? This dot my numbers. How about that? What does the this keyword do anyway? Right? People are confused. Right? Can I do this? It does. Right? So this is the object. My object is the function in it. Right? And I assign this numbers method, and I assign some values to it. Right? Or this numbers variable. Right? Let's see how this works if I go back. So if I go back to this, and I refresh the page, then I get this. Uncaught type error, cannot read properly my numbers of undefined. So what's the real way to do it, and how come I'm having such trouble with it, right? Well, it takes us back to, closure and what this means, right? So if I go back to this, whenever I surround anything within these brackets, it's inaccessible unless I tell it to otherwise. And I can create properties and objects. Like for example, if I want to, what if I want to kind of make so that my init function has my numbers, a my numbers object. Here's my numbers object. And I want in here, I want to say console.log my numbers, right? That is accessible, right? Because that's inside the scope. So what is it going to kind of pump out? It should pump out an object of first number and second number, right? So let's take a look and see what that does. So boom, I've got an object, right? App started. Here's my object, first number and second number, right? So it actually prints that out. But that's done inside of my function in it. It's inaccessible out here, right? I can't do this, right? How about if I do this? What if I say, you know what? I want to return my numbers. So I do one of these. I say, well, console.log my numbers, and at the bottom of my function I go return, my numbers. How about that? Do I? Let's see what it does now. What if I go return my numbers? And let's say, see what this does. So I'll go back and refresh. Oh, I didn't do anything with that. I did return. Give me an error, though. Did not give me an error. Let's see what I can do with this now. So I go back, and I'm going to go console.log, right? A little experimentation here. Console.log, and then I'm going to put all this in here and see what it returns. So then we'll say something like, just as an annotation, outside the function. Okay, so my numbers, first and second, and this should be another object, yeah? Let's take a look and see if that works. Fresh. Undefined. I'm trying to get a return, right? How about if I just do this? It's returning something, but I'm trying too hard. What if I just do one of these? What would that return? I want you guys to understand what the scope of a function is and how it's used, because we want to have more functionality than this, right? And I want you guys to guess, because some people, the biggest problem they have is they look at functions in JavaScript and they have no clue how they work, right? And how they don't work. Okay, so let's check this out and see if it works. Refresh, and I say, here's a local object. I have an object that I'm returning. I'm returning something. This is object of type object. But I can't access that object, right? That's interesting. So I got a return. Now what if I do something like, can I do first number? Look, first number is coming up. Can I do this, right? Right? Because my numbers is returning number. My numbers is what's being returned, right? Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So let's see what I get now when I save, right? And go back to here and refresh. Now I get outside the function is 1. First number is 1. That's the value of first number, right? So now I'm getting a value. And the reason why I'm getting that is because I specifically said in my function that I'm going to get the first number, right? And the reason why is because I'm returning or exposing the my numbers object with the return statement. Okay, so that's interesting. If I could do that, what if I then return the value of this? Right? What do I get then? So I'm going to kind of go back and go over here like this, and I want to see what I get when I return this. I'm returning the value. I'm returning a reference to the object, right? Now what do I get? And if I go back to here and refresh, right, then I get an object, right? An object. That's what it says, an object window. Well, that's interesting, because if I go back to this and I press dot, right, what am I getting? I'm getting a kind of access to this. What if I say my numbers? Can I have access to that still? I'm returning my, a reference to this, right? Therefore, I should be able to get my numbers, no? Again, it's all in the way we code it with JavaScript. And we have to be very careful what we return, the type of return, and everything else. It gives us the ability for us to expose or control what's being exposed. No code hinting. No code hinting tells me I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm playing in the dark. If you don't know functions in JavaScript, you're going to keep guessing, just like we're all guessing here. I'm asking questions. Or I'm saying, yeah, it's going to return, and other people saying no, and we don't know what it is, right? Unless you look at the API documentation, which you could, right? But the reason why we have code hinting is we want to rapidly, create applications, right? Rapid application development. Okay, so how do we add code hinting to our JavaScript? Well, we add TypeScript. This is what we're going to do. So how do we add TypeScript to VS Code? And then I'm going to upload to GitHub in a second. All right? How do I add TypeScript to VS Code? Right? Well, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to add a new file that I'm going to add in called tsconfig.json. So do this for me, please. tsconfig.json. And then I'm going to press Control space, which is going to give me this little default value. It's going to actually give me the compiler options for my TypeScript, because I got to compile, I got to transpile from JavaScript, right? From TypeScript into JavaScript, right? And I also want to add one more. I'm going to put a comma here and go map, capital M. And if you notice, there's something, I have a choice to select source map. That's what I want. And I want to set source maps to true. And the reason why is because if I set source maps to true, when it transpiles, I'll get a source map, which will give me some good code hinting on the console, right? Like on the browser console, to tell me where my TypeScript file is an error, right? That's what source maps do for me. All right, so that's one thing. That's piece one. So tsconfig.json. Step one, to create my my environment. Everyone with me on this one? Again, you can control space in an empty tsconfig.json. Control space will give you some of this by default. Okay, part two. I want to declare, and this is where people run into problems. I'm just going to tell you in advance. You're going to have some problems when I do this. For some of you who are using the school computers, you'll have a problem. All right. I'm going to do Shift Command B, right, or Shift Control B for the Windows users. When I do that, it says no task runner configured. And some of you will go, hold on. When I do Shift Command Control B, it starts some other process because of my window. It doesn't allow me to get there, right? That's okay. We'll do it anyway, and then I'll tell you what to do. All right. So I'm going to configure my task runner, and in my task runner, I have all this stuff. I'm going to just get rid of it all because I don't need it. Right. So if you can get to Shift Command Control B, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff, and all you should have in your task runner is the following. And I'm going to show you what you get with the task runner. So we'll build it together. But this is configuring my little compiler here. That's what I'm doing. Once we do this one time, and you've done it a couple times, you'll be able to do it again and again. So I need these options configured in your task.json file, which we're going to make. One thing you can get rid of is this hello world.ts. I don't need that. Okay. So this is my task.json file. Now, if you press Control Shift B and you've got some other funny pop-up because you're using the computer in front of you, the Windows machine in front of you that's supplied by the school, right? Then you have to create a VS Code folder, so .vs code folder, with a tasks folder underneath it, right? And then if you press Control space, you'll get kind of a template that you should replace with what I'm showing you here. So replace it with this template. Let me know when you guys are done, for the people who are using the computers in front of them from the school, right? Otherwise, it will not work for you. Yes? I'll come around after and I'll help you out. Just bear with me. The tsconfig file should look like this. That's all it should look like. So retype it like this, tsconfig.json. And I'll run both of them so you can see both of them. All right? So here's my task.json file on the right, and here's my tsconfig file.json on the left. All right? Those are the two things. That's how you have to configure your stuff so far. That's one really cool thing about VS Code, because VS Code allows us to do split screen nice and easy, and we're going to use this a lot. Okay. Are you guys still with me? Anyone not at this space? Anyone still behind? Because I'm going to move on. And then I'm going to upload to GitHub. Okay, we need one more thing for the users here in school, right? One more thing. And I'm going to do that by doing to a couple places. I'm going to go to my Windows 10 machine here for a second. Here's my Windows 10 machine. And I'm going to run, when it actually responds, I'm going to run my Visual Studio Code. I love Windows 10 on VMware, just fantastic, not. let's just go into to this and see what it looks like. If I run my keybindings.json, I want you to create a new file on the root called keybindings.json, right? Notice it's on the C:\roaming. And the way you do that, by the way, you can't just do just a regular keybindings.json file. That won't work for you, right? The way you have to do it is you have to go to File, Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts. And that's what it'll do. It'll create this keybindings.json file. That's the only way it'll do it, okay? Don't try and create it just on the root, because if you notice, it ain't here. It's in a special place. On the Windows machines, it's on C:, whatever the username is, Tom, app data, roaming, code, user, right? It goes inside of a preferences file for all of Visual Studio Code. You're creating key bindings for your program. And this is the key binding I want you to make, this one right here, okay? So type this in when you make your key binding. By the way, if you're on a Mac or a Linux machine, this may not work for you because workbench.action.task.build does not work properly on in a Mac. So I can't just go ahead and create a key bindings file. That won't work. I have to do it the right way. And if I was to try doing this on my own, and I'll keep this up for a second, so we'll try this. What this does is it says, when I press Control S, which is equivalent to you saving your file, it's going to transpile. So you don't have to, we can get around the issue that you had before, which is, pressing Control Shift B will actually come up with some kind of pop-up in Windows on the local system in front of you, right? You can avoid that. But this is actually a really cool shortcut to use for Windows users, so you can compile on safe. That's what it does, right? It transcompiles on safe. Okay, so let's get back. I'll show you how it works on the Mac, right? So I've got these two files. I've got tsconfig.json configured right here in the root. Inside my .vs code folder, for Windows users, you have to put in this task.json file, which is this one, and configure it this way with problem matchers, TSC, and so on. And then the final thing is, under the key bindings, right? You're going to go under code, right? You're going to go to Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, and that'll create your key bindings file, which you can modify, like I said. Okay, so I'm going to save, and now I'm going to do my first transpile, right? But in order for me to do that, this app.js file, we're going to rename it. Right-click, rename, to an app.ts file. Let's see the code hinting we just get just by doing that. Right? So there we go. So app.ts. And I'm going to open up this other window here by clicking this split pane. Right? And I'm going to put my JavaScript file on this side and just save this thing. So it's the app.ts file. I'm going to, my app. So I'm going to just get rid of this. And you notice it's the same file that I'm looking at. When I transpile, I want my app.js here and my app.ts on this side. Okay, let me transpile. So I'm going to press on the Mac, Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B. For you, just press Control-S. And if you've configured things properly, you should get a file that gets created, right? Like this. Look at my file structure now. I get an app.js file, right? App.ts, and on this side, app.js. Who does not have this? You don't have it? I'm going to kill you. No, I'm joking. So again, it's app.ts. If you've set everything up properly, if you Control S, it'll transpile on save, and it'll make it so that it does everything. Yes, what's your question? Keybindings.json is right here. With a swipe of my magical hand, I go to Windows 10 in my VM, right? That's what you need. You need to have configured this way, this way. If you don't have your Windows 10 configured, you won't Control S. It won't transpile. But if you have your own machine, you can just go Control Shift B, and that should still transpile. Yes. How do I create it? It's automatically created because I did it in my tsconfig.json file. I said source maps true. Yes. Source maps, what they do is when we do debugging in the browser, I can see my TS file as well as my JS file and where the error is, not just my JS file. Otherwise, you won't see a mapping to the TS file. Helps us debug. Questions so far? Anybody? When on the break, I'm gonna do a short break soon, and then I'll come around and fix everybody, right? Because that's what I did last day. All right? That's what happens. Right? All right, so let's assume that everything is good. I'm just gonna go back to this. Again, I have my tsconfig file, and here I have my app.ts. Here's gonna be my app.js. And they're identical because on this side and on this side, they're the same, right? Okay, let's get rid of this stuff. I'm gonna kind of repurpose some of the stuff. So let me get rid of this line here. We're going to do a function call, and we're going to kind of access. I want to have access to my numbers, right? Look now what I do when I hover over it. I say my numbers, the local variable, my numbers, and it has first number, and a second number, and I want to return, right? I want to return my numbers again. I want to go back to that and return my numbers. What if I return my number dot first number? Can I do that? Yes, I can. But I can also just do my numbers, right? Now if I call it, and if I do something like this, init, right, dots, right, and if I notice that I have first number and second number popping up like I did before, right? But if I want, what if I want my numbers, and I put that in? Well, what I get is this underline. This is what TypeScript does for us. It gives us some code ending that says, property my numbers does not exist on type first number, second number. Because I'm returning my numbers. I'm returning a reference to the type as opposed to, I can't access it directly. And if I do the same thing, if I return this, right, and if I return this, right, then what am I doing when I return this? If I hover over it, it says I'm returning any. It doesn't return anything right now, right? That's not what it's returning. I'm not returning anything right now, right? Or how about if I do this, like I said before, this dot my numbers, right? Then down here in my console log, I can't just do my numbers. I gotta use the keyword this again, this dot my numbers, right? But over here, if I hover over init now, right, I have my function init that returns something, any, right? So I'm returning this. Let's see what I get when I transpile. So Command Shift B, Control Shift B for the PC, or Control S if your PC is in front of you. Notice how on the right side you get JavaScript. On the left side is JavaScript. So TypeScript, in this particular case, it's the same. There's no difference. There's no advantage right now, okay? The advantages come into play when I want to do troubleshooting and when I want to say that, you know what, my function init is actually what I want it to do is I want it to return a string. So I want my function to return a string, right? Because that's how we can return stuff. I can code this up so that my string function returns a string. That's what this is. My init function returns a string. And if that's true, if my init function returns a string, then if I hover over this, it says my function returns a string. It knows that it returns a string, which means I can do something like I can parse it. I can do whatever. What if I return a number? If I return a number, so here's I can return a number. Right. So I'm just going to type it properly. Number. There's my number. So I can return a number, I can return a string, and if I hover over this, I get returns a number, right? My code hinting, which is good. So if I return this, if I say this dot my numbers, that's what I want to return, right? If I hover over it, it says it's my number, but I'm returning my numbers. And why? Because this is any. This is not a type. This dot numbers has no type. It's not a type. It's an object of numbers of two properties, right? Which makes no sense. It's an anonymous object that I've created, right? And this is the old JavaScript way. It doesn't tell you anything, right? But what if I went like this? The numbers, this my numbers. What if I started saying that my number, right? Instead of using this keyword, right? So I'll say this, get rid of this keyword, and my number now, let's get rid of this, right? Is equal to a number. My number is a number, and it equals to the number 5, right? And I have to put a var in there because I have to declare it, right? So I have to say var my number is equal to my number 5. We'll say my number, and now this. Can I still use this keyword here? Right? No, because this keyword doesn't apply to my number, right? But what if I do this? My numbers. Hold on a second. How come it's not working? It's expecting me to use the this keyword, right? Cannot find my number. Oh, my numbers. Oh. How about now? A local variable that's a number. A local variable that's a number. Okay, now here, the local variable that's a number. So I'm returning my number. It's a local variable, right? Now what if I want to print it out, or if I want to set it to a string, right? So I want to say var my string, right, which is of type string, is equal to my number. Can I do that? Well, no, because we've told it that init is returning a number. It knows it's returning a number, and when I hover over it, it says number is not assignable to type string. So what TypeScript is doing is it's giving us code hinting to find our errors before we do them. Hey, is this perfectly good JavaScript, by the way? If I try and do this, what does it transpile to? Let's try this out and see what happens, right? So I transpile, and it does this. Var my string is equal to init. Well, guess what? My string, even though it says string, could be any, right? So this is perfectly legal. Perfectly legal JavaScript on the right side, illegal TypeScript on the left side, because I've declared my string as a string in my context, in the business context, and it's actually a number that I'm returning, which I've declared as a number. So type declarations, what they allow us to do is they allow us to check to see that our code is exactly what we want it to be. Okay, and this is all, again, this is pretty academic, right? It's pretty easy. But let's go into something more complicated, right? When we talked about, I wanted to have a property, I want to have a module, all this kind of stuff. How do I do that? And then we'll pause for a break after this, okay? So I'm going to get rid of all this, right? Do it with me, guys. And I'm going to make a new class, like you'd love to make in your object orientation, right? So class, type this out for me, please. This is the new stuff. And my class is going to be the person class, right? Here's my person class. And my person class, I'm going to use my open bracket, kind of stuff, my open, kind of bracket here and this bracket here. And then inside there, I want to kind of declare a constructor for my person class. And let's use some comments. So I'm going to say constructor. Here's my constructor. And you know what? My person class is going to have, this is kind of neat, I'm going to have a private name variable. I'm going to use, for every private variable, for when we work together, you guys and I, and just like we did last time, what's my convention for private variables, Pete? Come on, we did it together. Huh? You don't know, you don't remember, right? Underscore is what we're going to name them. We're going to say underscore name, right? That's what we're going to say. We're going to declare this as a string. Right? Okay, that's cool. So in my constructor function, I'm going to listen for a name, right? Which is also going to be a string. That's what I'm going to listen for. And of course, in my constructor function, I want to assign my name, private name variable, to the name that I get into my constructor. So I'm going to say, of course, this dot underscore name is equal to name. Now you can see this in Java, C#, whatever it is, right? This is regular stuff when you start coding. And of course, we can't just leave our class just like this. We have to make it do something. So we'll just make a new method. Here's our public method, public methods. And our public method, we're going to make public, is going to be called, of course, say name, right? Which is going to return void. And in our say name method, we're going to say, well, console.log, your name is plus this dot underscore name. Right? There we go. Let me give you some more space here. All right, cool. Right? That's it right here. But we can't, this just as a class, we can't do anything with this class. This is the person class. So we'll make some other annotations here. So we'll say, oh, this is the person class, our big person class. Right? That's massive. Here's my person class. And I'll add some funny comments here. There we go. With my public methods, just to make you guys feel like it's a big-ass class, which it isn't. Right? Save it. And now I want to use it. So how do I use it? I can do something like this, right? I can say, var Tom, right, is equal to new person. And of course, it tells me what I need. It tells me that I need a name that's a string type, right? So I can say Tom, right? If I put something else in there instead of a string, if I go 1, it's going to error out, right? Because it knows that my constructor needs a string. It says argument of type number is not assignable to parameter of type string. So code hinting galore, right? And not only that, but if you notice how it pulled up person, right? So if I went to var Tom is equal to new person, if I say new, oops, I start typing person, I get code hinting. There's my person, and it tells you my constructor. Constructor person, right? But this is the best. I can go Tom dot say name, and what that does is it's going to say my name, right? Your name is blah blah blah, right? And here's what happens when it transpiles, and this is the best. So Command Shift B, Control Shift B, or Control S, and then it does this, right? Notice how it uses a closure. It's a self-executing anonymous closure that we name person. That is the class. This is the way we do classes in JavaScript. It's like a great way to learn how to make classes in JavaScript. So the outer class is a person, right? Then I name my function. The inner name is my constructor. There's my constructor in JavaScript. This is how it looks with a function. And then I do person, capital P, which is the same as this person, dot prototype dot say name is equal to function, just like we were trying to do. And then we're going to return person, which is the big person, out to this. And then that's how we create classes. Notice how the JavaScript is beautiful when it's done, but I like this way a lot more. So to me, beautiful, ugly. Beautiful, right? Ugly. And nice, right? You can understand how it goes, right? So beautiful and ugly. Some people might find this beautiful, not me, right? I find this much more understandable. We've learned object orientation, and let's see what we get on the command line to make sure we're just not fooling ourselves, right? So I'm going to refresh, and I get your name is Tom, right? So we get everything we want to get in this self-executing function, right? We're still linking, just keep in mind though, right? When I go back to my index.html, then I'm still linking to my app.js, not my app.ts, because my browser doesn't know about app.ts. It doesn't know anything about a TypeScript file. It knows JavaScript. And the stuff we pump out with TypeScript is pure JavaScript, which is cross-platform. Guys, I've built games, I've built full application, enterprise-level applications with TypeScript. It's a fantastic tool, and the reason why I'm saying is it's going to help us with Node and with Express is because it gives us wonderful typing, and it tells us there's issues, right, with our code. We can find problems, that whole needle in a, kind of in a haystack idea, you can't find it, you can't find your problem in Node or Express. This gives you the problem. It gives you extra problems too. Problems that says, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And we'll see that when we get into using TypeScript with Express and Node next week. So let me upload this to GitHub for you guys to have this example. So I'm going to go here, and inside VS Code, I'm just going to add all of them into the staging area and just say something like this, updated app.js or .ts, and then kind of add that in and push. Now you should have everything up online, okay, up on GitHub. Let's take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this insanity called TypeScript, okay?